Nestled in a quiet corner of the city, the neighborhood was a quintessential example of suburban life. Lush green lawns stretched out like vibrant carpets, each house adorned with charming facades that reflected the unique personalities of their owners. Tree-lined streets wound through the community, inviting children to play and neighbors to stroll. It was an idyllic setting, where the sounds of laughter mingled with the rustling leaves, creating an atmosphere of warmth and camaraderie. At the heart of this community lay the Homeowners Association, HOA, a governing body tasked with preserving the neighborhood's aesthetic appeal and ensuring a harmonious living environment. The HOA established guidelines that dictated everything from lawn care to home renovations, aiming to maintain property values and promote unity among residents. While many appreciated these efforts, others felt constrained by what they perceived as overzealous regulations. The HOA held regular meetings where members could voice their opinions, raise concerns, or propose changes to rules. These gatherings often served as forums for lively discussions about community standards. For many, being part of the HOA meant taking pride in their homes and working together to enhance their shared living space. However, there were those who took their roles within the association too seriously. Enter Karen. Karen had made it her mission to uphold every rule with fervor, believing that her position gave her authority over her neighbors' lives. Her watchful eyes seemed to be everywhere, making her both a source of comfort for some and a figure of dread for others. Little did anyone know how far her obsession with control would escalate, leading to an incident that would not only disrupt the peace but also bring law enforcement into their quiet suburban haven. Karen was a familiar face in the neighborhood, known for her sharp gaze and unwavering commitment to enforcing the HOA's regulations. She had lived in the community for over a decade and took great pride in her role as an unofficial watchdog. With a clipboard often in hand, Karen patrolled the streets, making mental notes of any perceived infractions. Whether it was a lawn that hadn't been mowed to her standards or a fence painted an off-brand shade of white, she was quick to voice her discontent. Her reputation among residents was mixed. While some appreciated her dedication to maintaining community standards, many others found her intrusive and controlling. Whispers circulated at neighborhood gatherings about her penchant for sending complaint letters at the first sign of non-compliance. "She's like the neighborhood police," one resident would chuckle, while another remarked, "You can never be too careful with Karen watching." There were instances where her vigilance bordered on absurdity, like the time she chastised a family for leaving their trash bins out a few hours longer than permitted. The community had grown accustomed to her antics, rolling their eyes at her overly strict interpretations of the rules. Yet, despite being disliked by many, Karen clung fiercely to her self-appointed title as the enforcer of order. As tensions rose, some residents began to band together in quiet defiance of her authority, sharing stories of their encounters with her. It became clear that underneath Karen's seemingly noble quest for perfection lay an obsession that could easily spiral out of control. Little did anyone suspect how far this obsession would push her, and them, into uncharted territory where rules could lead to chaos and confrontation. It was an ordinary Tuesday when the bizarre incident unfolded, catching everyone in the neighborhood off guard. The sun was shining brightly, and the sound of children playing echoed through the streets. I was in my living room, sipping coffee and enjoying the calm, when there was a knock at the door. To my surprise, it was Karen, clipboard in hand, her expression serious as she stepped inside uninvited. "Do you have a moment?" she asked, adjusting her glasses as if preparing to deliver an important announcement. I nodded warily, wondering what new rule I had inadvertently violated this time. With a flourish, Karen presented me with a piece of paper that detailed her latest grievance. "I'm afraid you owe rent for living in your own home," she declared, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. My heart sank. "Rent?" I repeated incredulously. "What are you talking about?" Karen proceeded to explain her absurd rationale. Because I had made minor changes to my property, like planting flowers and painting my front door, she believed I had effectively altered the community's aesthetics and thus should pay her a fee for permission to live there. It felt like a surreal nightmare. I struggled to comprehend how someone could be so delusional. As I stood there in disbelief, trying to process her claim, Karen became increasingly agitated, insisting that her authority justified this unreasonable demand. The tension in the air thickened as I realized this wasn't just another infraction, it was the beginning of a conflict that would spiral beyond mere annoyance. Little did I know that this confrontation would set off a chain of events culminating in police involvement, forever changing the dynamics of our quiet neighborhood. As I stood there, Karen's words echoed in my mind like a bad joke I couldn't quite grasp. "You owe rent for living in your own home." The absurdity of it all left me reeling, my heart racing with disbelief. How could someone even think this was acceptable? I tried to process the claim and found myself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, anger, and an unsettling sense of violation. My thoughts quickly turned to property rights and the sanctity of owning one's home. The concept seemed so simple. I had worked hard to buy this house, to create a space that reflected who I am. It was my sanctuary, not merely a dwelling subject to whims of an overzealous neighbor. Who was Karen to decide what changes I could make or impose such ridiculous demands? The more I considered her claims, the more furious I became. It felt as though she were attempting to play puppet master with my life. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, but the reality of her confrontation weighed heavily on me. What if others in the neighborhood started to believe her? What if they sided with her or felt compelled to concede to her ridiculous standards out of fear? The thought was chilling. In that moment, a surge of determination washed over me. This wasn't just about flowers or paint colors, it was about standing up for my rights and asserting that no one could dictate how I lived in my own home. Yet, underneath that resolve lay a flicker of anxiety. This confrontation had crossed a line, and I could already feel the tension brewing within our once peaceful community. Feeling a mix of resolve and anxious anticipation, I knew I couldn't let Karen's bizarre demand go unanswered. That following Saturday, armed with a sense of determination, I marched over to her house. My heart pounded as I approached the infamous clipboard she always had at the ready, hoping to confront her with the calmness I knew this situation required. When I knocked on her door, it swung open almost immediately. Karen stood there, her expression shifting from surprise to something resembling a smirk, like she reveled in being the reason for my visit. "Back for more, are we?" she asked with an air of superiority that made my blood boil. "I need to talk about your claim that I owe you rent," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. I could already feel the tension electrifying the air between us, thick enough to cut. "It's absolutely preposterous for you to think that you have any right to charge me for living in my own home. My modifications are minor and perfectly within my rights as a homeowner." Karen crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe, eyeing me with a condescending gaze. "You don't understand the responsibility that comes with these changes," she replied, her tone dripping with entitlement. "I'm just looking out for the neighborhood's best interests." "But you're not a landlord," I shot back, an edge of frustration creeping into my voice. "You can't impose your rules on me just because of your self-appointed authority." In that moment, it was clear we were at an impasse. Her casual dismissal of my concerns only fueled my determination. The conversation escalated, each exchange revealing how deeply entrenched she was in her misguided belief that control equated to care for the community. What started as a simple exchange quickly devolved into a heated argument, both of us unwilling to back down. As tensions flared, it became evident that our confrontation would affect not only our relationship but potentially alter the atmosphere of our entire neighborhood forever. After the intense confrontation with Karen, I realized that mere words wouldn't suffice to defend my rights. The gravity of her demand weighed heavily on me, and I knew I needed to compile evidence to counter her claims. I decided to meticulously gather every piece of correspondence and documentation related to our interactions. First, I went through my emails, searching for any exchanges with the HOA where Karen's involvement was evident. I recalled previous conversations about neighborhood guidelines and the normal communications we had regarding community events. As I sifted through the digital clutter of my inbox, I stumbled upon a few emails where Karen had asserted her opinions, each one a testament to her self-importance within the association. Next, I turned to my text messages. My friends and neighbors often joked about Karen's antics, and I realized these conversations might prove useful. I began screenshotting threads where her overreach had been discussed, including instances where others shared their frustrations at her intrusive behavior. This growing collection of evidence painted a clearer picture of her troubled mentality, a pattern of entitlement that transcended my personal situation. In addition to digital records, I made notes from memory about our face-to-face encounters. Every sarcastic remark and condescending tone she'd used during our discussions became crucial points in my narrative against her. With each piece of evidence I gathered, my resolve strengthened. It was no longer just about her odd demand for rent but about standing firm against a neighbor who sought to undermine my autonomy. By the time I finished compiling everything, I felt more prepared than ever. I knew that if this situation escalated further, whether through discussions with other neighbors or even legal avenues, I would have a solid foundation to support my case against Karen and her unfounded claims. As days turned into weeks, the situation with Karen only escalated. She became increasingly aggressive in her demands, showing up unannounced at my door with her clipboard in hand as if she were the designated authority of our neighborhood. Each visit carried an air of hostility that left me feeling cornered and anxious. During one encounter, she accused me of violating HOA rules regarding property aesthetics, claiming that my flowerbed had diminished the neighborhood's visual integrity. "You still owe me that rent," she insisted, her tone dripping with condescension. I could hardly believe it. My modest gardening efforts were now twisted into a violation serious enough to warrant her outlandish claims. The breakdown of communication became apparent as my attempts to reason with her only intensified her hostility. When I tried to explain that my changes were within my rights as a homeowner, she dismissed my concerns, further entrenching herself in her misguided beliefs. "You just don't understand the bigger picture," she huffed, unconcerned about how her demands were affecting our interactions and the neighborhood's atmosphere. I noticed other neighbors started to look on with concern as well. Gossip circulated over backyard fences and during casual conversations at the park. Some voiced their anxiety about Karen's growing control over our community, while others expressed feelings of frustration at its implications on personal freedoms. The mood shifted from one of camaraderie to a palpable tension that loomed over every interaction. With each confrontation, Karen's threats escalated. She warned that if I didn't comply with her demands, I could face repercussions from the HOA, including fines or legal action. It felt as if she were not just attacking my home but undermining my right to live freely within it. As misunderstandings grew and communication faltered completely, it became clear this was no longer a simple disagreement, it was a burgeoning crisis that was on the brink of spiraling out of control. After weeks of mounting tension and relentless harassment from Karen, I reached a breaking point. Her behavior had gone from simply absurd to downright threatening. One afternoon, she showed up unannounced again, this time accusing me of spreading lies about her to our neighbors and warning me that my reputation in the community was at stake. It felt surreal hearing such accusations, considering I was merely defending my rights. The stress began to seep into every facet of my life, sleep eluded me, and I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder. The fear of what Karen might do next gnawed at me relentlessly. I had been gathering evidence in hopes of eventually resolving the situation through conversation or mediation, but it was clear that reason had no place in her agenda. Each encounter left me feeling more vulnerable, and I realized that her aggressive tactics might escalate further if left unchecked. That night, after another stressful encounter where she threatened fines and legal action, I made the difficult decision to involve local law enforcement. As I dialed the non-emergency number, a wave of anxiety washed over me. Would this action only make things worse? But I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed protection, not just for myself but for the integrity of my home. When the police arrived, they listened sympathetically as I detailed the incidents that led to this point. My heart raced as I shared how Karen's behavior had affected my sense of safety and well-being. The officers assured me they would take my concerns seriously and advised me to document any further interactions with her. Though relieved to have taken this step, a heaviness lingered in my chest. Involving law enforcement felt like crossing an irreversible line in our community. I couldn't help but wonder how this would reshape not only my relationship with Karen but also how neighbors perceived one another moving forward. It seemed like we were no longer just a quiet neighborhood, it was becoming a battleground marked by fear and distrust. Moments after I placed the call to the police, I stood in my living room, my heart pounding as I waited for their arrival. Thoughts rushed through my mind. Would they understand the gravity of the situation? Would they see how Karen's behavior had escalated beyond mere annoyance? The sound of sirens in the distance sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, and I felt both anxious and relieved that help was on its way. When the officers finally arrived, two of them stepped out of their patrol car, their uniforms crisp and badges gleaming. They looked around, taking in the quiet street dotted with well-maintained houses and manicured lawns. As they approached my front door, I could see their expressions shift from casual curiosity to serious attentiveness. One officer, a tall man with a commanding presence, knocked firmly before introducing himself. "Good afternoon. We received a call regarding some ongoing disputes with a neighbor." He looked at me expectantly while his partner stood slightly behind him, ready to observe but not yet intervening. I took a deep breath and nodded, ushering them inside. "Thank you for coming," I said. "It's about my neighbor, Karen. She's been harassing me for weeks now over ridiculous claims that I owe her rent for living here." The officers exchanged glances as I recounted the incidents that had led to my decision to call them. I explained how Karen had accused me of violating HOA rules and threatened me with fines and other repercussions. Every time I thought we could reach an understanding, her demands grew more absurd. The officers listened intently, nodding as I spoke. "Have you documented any of these interactions?" one asked, his tone professional yet compassionate. I hesitated but then mentioned the evidence I compiled, emails, texts, even notes detailing our confrontations. Their expressions showed they were taking this seriously. As they jotted down notes and asked clarifying questions, I felt a wave of anxiety lift slightly. Perhaps there was hope that this nightmare could be resolved after all. Yet beneath it all lingered uncertainty. How would Karen react once she learned the police were involved? Would this escalate things even further? After the police gathered my account and evidence, they informed me they would speak with Karen to get her side of the story. I held my breath, pacing in my living room, anxiously awaiting news through the thin walls of my home. I didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, I heard a sharp knock at my door, followed by raised voices outside. I rushed to open it just in time to catch sight of the officers leading Karen away from her own front porch. She was flanked by 2 policemen, her expression one of absolute shock and disbelief. "What is this?" she exclaimed, throwing up her hands as if to ward off some unseen threat. "I haven't done anything wrong." Her voice was a mix of outrage and confusion, but beneath it lay a hint of fear, a realization that her authority was crumbling right before her eyes. One officer stated firmly but calmly, "We're placing you under arrest for harassment and making threats against your neighbor." His tone carried an air of professionalism that only fueled Karen's indignation. Karen stammered, "You can't be serious. I'm just trying to keep our community in order. She's the one who's causing trouble." But her protests fell on deaf ears as the officers explained that her behavior constituted harassment rather than safeguarding the community standards she claimed to uphold. As they handcuffed her and read her rights, I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, relief mixed with uncertainty about what this meant for our neighborhood. As they led Karen towards the patrol car, her eyes locked onto mine. For a brief moment, there was silence between us, a heavy tension filled with disbelief. The weight of what had just transpired settled over me like a fog. It was impossible to predict how this event would ripple through our community dynamics in the days ahead. Would peace return now that Karen's actions had consequences? Or would her arrest only serve as fuel for further discord among neighbors? In the days following Karen's arrest, the neighborhood was buzzing with a mix of reactions. Conversation sparked like wildfire at backyard barbecues, and whispers filled the air during morning walks. It seemed that everyone had an opinion about the incident, revealing a deep divide in sentiments regarding HOA rules and enforcement. Some residents expressed relief, feeling that Karen's removal from the equation might restore harmony to the community. Finally, someone stood up to her, one neighbor remarked as we passed by each other on the sidewalk. She thought she could bully everyone into submission. This sentiment resonated with many who had felt oppressed by Karen's strict adherence to the rules and her self-appointed authority. Conversely, there were others who were sympathetic towards her and worried about the implications of her arrest. "What about community standards?" one elderly resident pondered aloud while enjoying tea on her front porch. "We need someone to keep things in check. Without that, people might start doing as they please." It was clear that the HOA's influence had previously been a source of comfort for some, and they viewed Karen's extreme measures as a misguided attempt to maintain order. Tension rippled through neighborhood gatherings as differing opinions clashed. Some felt emboldened, voicing their frustrations over countless petty grievances they had resigned themselves to accepting. Others remained apprehensive of potential chaos without someone like Karen at the helm. As I observed these conversations unfold, I realized how deeply ingrained our perceptions of community and authority were. The arrest juxtaposed feelings of liberation against fears of disorder, and it became evident that Karen's actions had inadvertently ignited a necessary dialogue about boundaries within our neighborhood. While some welcomed a newfound sense of freedom, others yearned for stability, hinting that the resolution of this situation was far more complex than merely removing one overzealous enforcer from our midst. It left me wondering about our next steps. Could we find a balance that respected individual freedoms while still upholding communal values? As the dust settled from Karen's arrest, I took time to reflect on the upheaval that had rippled through our neighborhood. The incident had exposed deep-seated tensions and differing opinions regarding authority and community standards. In many ways, it prompted a necessary dialogue among neighbors about what it meant to live in harmony while respecting individual rights. For me personally, this experience became a crash course in standing up for my beliefs and asserting my autonomy. Initially, I felt overwhelmed by Karen's aggressive demands, but as the situation escalated, I discovered a newfound strength within myself. Gathering evidence and seeking help from law enforcement was not just about confronting her, it was about reclaiming control over my living space and ensuring that my voice mattered. In the aftermath, I noticed subtle changes in our community dynamics. Conversations that once revolved around trivial matters now included discussions about boundaries and fairness. Neighbors began checking in with one another more frequently, fostering a greater sense of camaraderie. Some residents who had previously shied away from voicing their opinions started to speak up during HOA meetings, advocating for changes that might prevent future overreach by any single member. However, there remained an undercurrent of uncertainty. While some felt liberated by Karen's absence, others worried about the vacuum left behind. Who would step into her shoes, and would they bring a similar zeal for enforcing rules? It was evident that the path forward wouldn't be easy. We needed to find a balance between maintaining standards and allowing personal freedoms. The experience taught me that community isn't just about shared spaces, it's about shared values and mutual respect. Moving forward, I hoped we could cultivate an environment where everyone felt empowered to contribute positively while still respecting one another's rights, a delicate dance of unity amidst diversity. As I reflect on the tumultuous events that unfolded in our quiet neighborhood, I am reminded of the importance of personal rights and the power of community dynamics. The confrontation with Karen was an unexpected lesson in standing up against unjust authority. It revealed how quickly the balance of power can shift and how vital it is for individuals to advocate for themselves when faced with intimidation. In many ways, the incident served as a catalyst for change within our community. The challenge was no longer simply about one person's refusal to recognize boundaries but about creating an environment where every resident feels valued and heard. It showed me that silence in the face of bullying only empowers the aggressor, whereas speaking out can inspire others to do the same. This newfound awareness became a turning point for our neighborhood, prompting conversations about what type of community we wanted to build together. As we navigate these delicate dynamics, it is important to remember that living in proximity doesn't automatically equate to communal harmony. True community requires active engagement, empathy, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. We have a responsibility not just to uphold rules but also to ensure those rules are fair and promote a sense of belonging for everyone. Moving forward, I hope that we can foster an atmosphere that embraces diversity of thought and encourages constructive dialogue about our shared space. Establishing trust among neighbors will take time and effort, but it is essential for healing and rebuilding what was strained. Ultimately, this experience has shaped my understanding of coexistence, acknowledging that while laws and guidelines are necessary, they must be balanced with respect for personal freedoms. Together, let us work towards a community where every voice matters, ensuring that strength lies not just in enforcement but in unity and mutual respect.